Have you heard me talk about testing? You know how I love testing every aspect of every single thing I can possibly get my hands on? I'll test responses at bars. I'll test my answer when people say, "What do you do?" I'll test anything I can. You know who some of the best testers are? Comedians, especially professional comedians. In fact, one of my friends, Peter Sims, wrote a great book called Little Bets, where he outlines how Chris Rock systematically tests each and every single one of his jokes before it ever makes its way onto a huge HBO special. And if you watch this great series called Talking Funny with Ricky Gervais, Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, and Louis C.K., they actually talk extensively about how they come up with their jokes and how they rigorously test it. One of the stories, for example, was how Jerry Seinfeld hardly ever curses. Once, though, he used the F word in a joke. And it hit. It worked. But he was a little troubled by it. So he said, "I want to try it without the F word." And when it didn't land, he actually was more troubled. He said, "This joke isn't funny unless it has the F word." So he cut it entirely. Now, why am I bringing up comedians? Because they blend art and science together, which is exactly how tests should be run, right? So they know intuitively this is working or this is not working. It's not like there's a scoreboard out there. They actually notice the audience and they say, okay, that hit, that landed, or this didn't. But they also know how to test things enough times to make sure they've got it. And that's the same way you can use testing in your own life. The way I think about testing is I'm going to get the opportunity to do certain things many, many times in my life. I want to find the best possible answer, the best possible route home, the best possible solution. Now, I could sit back and think, I'm the smartest person in the world. I know exactly how to craft that perfect answer, or that perfect headline, or that perfect design. Or I can be humble enough to say, you know what? I probably don't know the answer. I think I have a rough sense. I could probably choose 3, but I have no idea which one is going to work or not. So you may have heard about testing in a sense of testing headlines. In my world, people test different headlines, and depending on which one you click on most, that one wins. So I've tested headlines, for example, that produced 3 times the open rate as the other one. Or I've tested a design that generated 68% more opt-ins than another form. But we can actually test things in a much simpler way. Think about the opportunities you have where you get to do the same thing over and over and over again. What if you were able to improve that by, let's just say, 20%? Or you were able to take a joke and make it twice as funny. Now imagine you use that same joke 200 times throughout your lifetime. Think of the results of being able to have a joke that's twice as funny 200 more times. Or think about, when someone says, "Hey, what do you do?" And you say, "I work in a nuclear power plant, I'm a janitor," and people are like, "Okay, nice to meet you," and they leave. Not very interesting. Now imagine all the opportunities that would open up if you actually learned how to properly position yourself. All right, so for example, people said, "Ramit, what do you do?" I used to say, "I'm a writer." You know what the response was? "Oh, really? That's so cool. My cousin's trying to become a writer too." Your cousin's not a writer, your cousin's unemployed. So then I tried author. I'm an author. And that got a very interesting response. People said, "Really? Like author of what?" And I say, "What do you mean?" And I'm messing around, I'm being friendly. "Oh, so do you write like books?" I'm like, "Yeah, you can find them in any bookstore." "What kind of books?" And now we're off to the races, okay? I can also test author and entrepreneur. I can test any number of things. But the point is, I'm taking this approach of testing rather than coming up with one generic answer and using that for the rest of my life. Now, I originally started thinking of this a long time ago. I remember at one point, one of my mentors, BJ Fogg, said, we were walking into a room together and he said, "How do you want to be introduced?" And I thought to myself, at that moment, I actually had no idea. If I had had the perfect answer, it would have opened up so many doors. But instead, typically until that point, I had been just saying, "I'm a student," or something boring like that. That really jolted me into reality to say, hey, I can think about these things, I can be conscious, and then I can test them. So what's the key to testing here? The first is to adopt the mentality of testing. Now, most of us don't do this because we're afraid of being wrong, but that's ironic because most of us are wrong our entire lives. At least testing puts a framework around it, a methodology. So you find out when you're wrong and you find out when you're right. Imagine if a comedian just came out with one joke the first time and they use that joke forever. See, most of us don't like to imagine that comedians are out there telling the same joke 100 or 200 times in slightly different ways, using different words, using different tonality, pausing. But what we like to see is the end result. The way they made the sausage is kind of unimportant as long as the answer is right. So nowadays, if someone says, "What do you do?" I have a nice little answer for that. Or, "Where are you from?" Or, "Do you work at home?" "Do you have an office?" I have a nice answer for that as well. All because I started approaching it with a testing mentality. So that was number one, to approach it with a testing mentality and to say, you know what, I'm probably not a genius. I have some sense of what is right or wrong, but I'm going to come up with a few theories and then test it. The second thing was to actually observe it in action. So if somebody says to me, "What do you do?" And let's say I'm at a bar or at a cocktail party or just at a house party, I might say, "Oh, I'm a writer." And I would notice, what are they saying? Are they interested? Are they engaged? And I would mentally file it away. It's not like I'm some weirdo walking around with a notepad. But after I did this 3 or 4 times or 10 times, you start to see a pattern. Then I might switch over to author, or I might switch over to something else. Imagine all the things you could notice if you had the same opportunity to bring up an answer 10 times. In just 10 interactions, you could dramatically notice whether this thing landed or not. Now, when I first started off testing, I was a little bit mechanical about it, right? I was a little nervous about what to say. People would say, "What do you do?" I'd say, "I'm a writer," because I was trying to decide which one should I try. Now, I've gotten a lot more comfortable with it, as you will too. It becomes much more intuitive for you to say, "Oh, I'm this," or "Oh, I do that," or "Oh, I'm going to try to test wearing this jacket versus something else," and see the reaction. But I still get it wrong sometimes. Here's a little post I made on Twitter, and I got it wrong. Take a look. Here I'm saying, at a restaurant this week, I watched a 2-hour dinner date where neither person laughed even once. So I thought this is pretty funny, right? You're sitting there looking at this date, they're not talking, they're miserable, and I was just like, "Ah, ha, ha, this is funny. Let's laugh at the misery of other people." Well, in fact, I got back like 10 or 20 Twitter responses saying, "You're a creep. Sounds creepy. What's wrong with you? Why don't you get something better to do?" And I was like, whoa, 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 hold on. I'm not a creep. That was a joke. But indeed, if it was just 1 or 2 people who had said that, I would have said, "Oh, whatever, they have no sense of humor." But when 10 or 20 people said it to me, I was listening and I realized I had done something wrong. So I actually issued a correction tweet or something to add a little bit of color, which I rarely do. Let's take a look at that one. "Haha, so many responses to my tweet on the non-smiling couple. When you have a long dinner with friends, you notice the bad date next to you." All right, now here's what I think happened. Let's go back to the first tweet and let's take a look at my language. Let's look at it again. At a restaurant this week, I watched a 2-hour dinner date where neither person laughed even once. So to me, that seems normal. It seems like everything about that is normal, and I thought it was pretty funny. I was cracking up as I wrote it. But people found it creepy. Why did they find it creepy? I'm thinking here like a scientist. I'm trying to unearth something, right? Here's what I think I did wrong. Can you spot it? The word "watched" is weird. For whatever reason, to watch someone for 2 hours is weird. What if instead of saying this, I had said, "At a restaurant this week, I noticed a 2-hour dinner date where neither person laughed even once." I noticed. What if I'd said that? I bet you the reactions would have been totally different. So sometimes, in something as subtle as one word you use, you can get a dramatically different reaction. Author, writer, totally different. To me, it boggles the mind that many of us go our entire lives not testing the things we do every single day, introducing ourselves, what we wear, the route we take to get home, the number of hours we sleep, different ways to motivate ourselves to get to the gym. Why don't we do this? Because we don't have this testing mentality. We're afraid of failing, which is ironic because we are already failing by not testing. So let me offer you a couple of action steps here when it comes to testing things. The first thing I want you to do is identify 3 areas that you can test. Typically, these are things like, what do you do? where are you from, what brought you here. These are common questions you're going to get. They could be what you wear. Again, it could be different ways to get you to the gym. I recently successfully tested a new way of reducing my naps from 30 minutes to 20 minutes. And to do that, it took me 6 months. All right? You don't have to do a 6-month test right now, but there are all kinds of different things you've wanted to do, and you're not sure what or how to do it. So your action step for this video is to select 3 things to test. Again, could be where you work, what you do, or even something physical like smiling more. Test those things. Next time you have an interaction, you're going to have prepared in your mind, oh, I'm going to smile extra hard when I see this person. Or instead of saying I'm a marketing coordinator, you say I help companies grow their business. Try it. See the reaction. Notice it. After just 1 week of doing this, I guarantee you'll be surprised. And you might wonder why you've never tested these things before and all the other things in your life that you can now test your way to success.